Hi guys, Jakin here, and today I will give you a comprehensive tutorial on how to manipulate others. I'm sure most of you have experienced some form of manipulative actions and treatments throughout your lives. Perhaps you tried to manipulate someone yourself to try and get your agenda through, or perhaps you were frustrated because you couldn't manipulate others as effectively as you would have liked. So why stop there? Following are some tips and tricks to help you manipulate others like a pro. So the first and the most straightforward method is threat. Scare and bully them. Use force, punch them, spank them, punish them, shout and scream. The characteristics of this method is that the manipulator and the person being manipulated both clearly know what's up. You're trying to manipulate him or her to make them take whatever action you want them to take. And you're not going to back down no matter what, even if it means using force and brutality. So pros, it is a very direct form of manipulation, and with the right setting and circumstances, you will get fast and immediate results. Cons, it only works for a few handful of people that you have direct control and authority over, since it is hard to obtain that level of power over someone else. Additionally, this form of manipulation is hard to maintain since the person you're trying to manipulate clearly knows that they're being manipulated, so they will try to escape from this situation as soon as possible. And some additional warnings: use this with precautions, since this form of manipulation has the biggest potential of backfiring and hurting you later on in your life. Unless you're in a great hurry and unless you will have continuous power and influence over the person, I would recommend using other forms of manipulation that are relatively concealed. So the second form of manipulation is guilt tripping. This form is very common among manipulators, and it is considered to be one of the basics of manipulation. To successfully guilt trip someone, you must know the person fairly well, know their values and internal obligations, and use it to your advantage. This method involves long hours of talking to and careful prodding at the person's heart. It works exceptionally well for religious leaders, and if you find someone with a sensitive conscience, then you've pretty much hit the jackpot. Keep your emphasis on religion, faith, and quote-unquote moral obligations. Remember, this is not to help or guide, but to manipulate the other person to achieve your own goals. So it really doesn't matter if what you're saying is actually true, as long as you get your way and as long as he or she acts according to your will. Pros. This method is very binding in the long run, since you are tapping into the very core values of the individual. At the same time, you can come off as a moral teacher and a guide with positive intentions, all the while achieving your own goals and intentions. Cons. It inevitably takes time and effort. Not only do you have to understand the person fairly intimately, you also need to have some amount of authority over the person. Also, if and when the person understands that you are not the moral teacher but rather a manipulator, you will not only lose all control and influence, you might end up never seeing him or her ever again. Just the sheer pleasure and peace the person might feel after being lifted out and freed from your judgmental grasp would most likely make that person run as far away as possible from you. So make sure that you keep that iron grasp over him as long as possible. The third method is emotional appeal. This method is rather similar to the previous method, guilt tripping. It mostly only works on those that are closest to you, such as your children, brother and sisters, your close friends, etc. It involves emotionally breaking down and crying before your victim. Show them you're hurt and how they're causing you physical and mental emotional pain through their action or inaction. The classic, "How could you do this to me? I can't sleep these days. My life has no meaning now," added with, deep sighs, sobbing, and tears should do the trick most of the time. Be the victim to manipulate the victim, if you know what I mean. Manipulators use this method intentionally, but sometimes even unintentionally. And sometimes being unintentional about it can be even more effective, since it comes off as more genuine. Regardless of your intentionality, there's no denying it can be very effective in manipulating your close ones to act according to your own will. Pros. Works best when the person has weak emotional stability or holds a relationship that is heavily emotionally invested in you. The tighter the bond, the more the person loves you and cares for you, the easier it will be for you to implement this strategy. Use that tight connection and relationship as a leverage to achieve your intentions easily and effectively. Cons. Since you are conveying emotional stress to your victim, there is a high possibility of yourself actually feeling stressed and emotionally drained. Additionally, since you are utilizing the close relationship you hold with the victim, the relationship itself might be broken as a consequence of your manipulation. But who cares about, the actual relationship? Remember, it's all about the fruition of your own intentions and goals, even at the expense of the relationships of your loved ones. So, downgrading and discouragement. Utilizing your victim's past failures and shortcomings can be very effective in discouraging and disheartening them, causing them to give up. Remember all those times when they just won't give up and stubbornly continue their ways? Consider using this method to those types of relentless and consistent people. Tell them how they have failed, how weak they are, how they would repeat the same cycle again. If that doesn't work, go one more step further and show them how others, people that are much smarter and greater than them, have tried the same thing and failed miserably. Human beings are weak, and they themselves are bound to constantly hold those same worries in their own heads, and you have just reassured them of their own uncertainties. Even the strongest person, without the support of their close ones, would have a hard time taking risks and making difficult decisions that require courage. Pros. People are naturally risk sensitive, and they would instinctively avoid risks at all times if possible. The risk sensitive and aversive nature of human is definitely on your side, so don't worry too much. Your manipulative words will sound stronger and louder to your victim than hundreds of other voices that are encouraging and building. Besides, even if you don't know your victim's past and their failures, it's easy to find negative stories and past, incidents of others anywhere and everywhere. Cons. The fact that you are discouraging others to take risks and go beyond their comfort zone will mean that your life will be mostly surrounded by people that are complacent and hate taking risks. You will be surrounded with negative, weak, and discouraging minds, but, who cares? As long as you achieve your means of dragging others down to your level and keeping them there. All right, relationships and bonds. This method strictly works only with the close ones. Although the target audience is very restrictive, it is one of the most effective and widely used methods for manipulation. Everyone has their close ones, so use that relationship to manipulate them to act according to your thoughts and will. Some examples include, remember who we are. I'm your father, your mother, your friend, or your something. How could you do this to me? If you're my blank, friend, son, daughter, father, mother, you wouldn't do this. You're not my blank, son, daughter, your mother, father, whatever, friend, if you do this, and the list goes on. Pros. It's easy to use and very handy. You don't need special skills or knowledge to manipulate, and it works best for last resort option. How many sons or daughters will be able to say okay when you say, you're not my child, if you continue doing ... Not many for sure. Cons. Repeated use of this method can cause the close ones to start considering creating distance from you, and you may lose the tight bond and trust you might have had previously. Use this method as a last resort and not too frequently. Make sure you don't cut that bond entirely, but slowly trap your victim into submitting to your will. All right, religion. Is religion good? Is it bad? That's not the issue here at all. It's about how you can utilize this powerful tool for your advantage to manipulate others. This is possibly one of the strongest manipulative tools out there, and many religious leaders have utilized this method to manipulate their followers. Religion possesses, I think, the possibility to radically transform a person positively, but also negatively. Some of the best and the worst historical events have been the result of a religious influence, and religion can awaken a person to truth and open-mindedness, but it can also blind an individual and prohibit logical thinking and common sense. So use that characteristics of religion to manipulate your victim. As a religious leader, your words always hold a certain degree of truth to it, which will be the best and perfect camouflage for your true agenda and intention. There are plenty of tools at hand, such as moral obligations, God's will, this is the only truth, etc. Slowly train your victims to think that your words are God's words, and listening and obeying you is equivalent to listening and obeying God. Alright, pros. You can lead many followers to obey and listen to your words blindly and even willingly. Despite having total control, you will also be lifted up as a leader and the quote-unquote prophet of God. As long as you hold the moral and religious image of yourself in the eyes of your followers or victims, your manipulation will work. Cons. It takes time to cultivate and build that trust between you and your victims. You will have to slowly but surely build your reputation as a prophet of God and a moral guide and teacher. You may have temptations to actually find truth and faith in religion in the process, but remember, your ultimate goal is not to find God or the truth, but to gain control and power over your victims. Precedence. Precedence is a good method of manipulation since you have a proven history of so-called success. Why fix something that works? Why take risks? We have done this way so far, so keep it that way. This is our method, this is our way. Conform to it or leave. As all other methods, there are some legitimacy mixed in the method of precedence. It is in some sense important to understand and preserve an individual's, family's, or organization's identity and characteristics. But at what point does it become too much and transforms as a tool to manipulate and control others? Who's to say? Exactly. Use that ambiguity to your advantage. Pros. Unlike your victim, you have a history and precedents to go by. While their statements are full of uncertainties and risks, your words have stronger appeal since you have the tradition and this is how we do things around here, behind your back. Cons, you might end up being tied down by your own statements. This is how we always do means later on, if you want to change it, you will have to come up with a clever way to change this precedence to suit your needs. It will involve some, reframing the argument, which we will explore later on in the video. Expectations. This requires giving away and investment to wreak control in the long run. Constantly remind your victim of the expectations you, as a parent or teacher or an organization, hold them to. Consistent buildup of expectations added with investments and certain degree of support will surely bind your victim's hand and feet under your control and influence. With every good deed, there is a string attached, an expectation. Once the time comes, following are some basic words you can use to remind them of who they're meant to be. This is what we expect of you. This is what everybody expects of you. How could you betray us? And the list goes on. Pros. Your victim has received investments and support without them even realizing that there was always a string attached to it, that they're being locked into a contract they can't back out of. It will be on their conscience and on their minds for a long time, and it will be hard to ignore that shackle around their ankle. Cons. It will take certain degree of sacrifice from you since you must invest into your victim before they totally come under your control. Of course, that sacrifice is not in vain since it will be a method of control and influence over your victim in the long run. Finance. This is one of the straightforward methods of manipulation. If you have their financial means and source in your hands, then it will be one of the strongest driving factors for manipulation and control. There are many examples of such manipulation. For example, CEOs and owners manipulating their workers to do things that are way beyond the initial agreement and contract simply because they hold their financial success and stability. Religious leaders and organizations holding financial control will be one of the strongest factors for total control and manipulation as well. Unless your victim finds a way to gain financial independence from you, your influence over them will be impeccable. Remember, this is not a form of helping and aiding, but intentionally taking away their financial independence to maintain control over them. Pros. Since your victim's whole financial life is dependent on you, it will be extremely difficult for them to get out of your manipulative control. They would have to undertake a radical shift and decision in their lives to change the situation and squirm out of your hand. Cons. Of course, you need some degree of financial stability and control in order to manipulate others with this method. So, it might not be for everybody, but if you have the means, go for it. The frame game. This last method of manipulation needs strategic thinking and wits. Always frame the argument to fit your argument and agenda. It doesn't matter if it is true, as long as it makes sense to you and benefits you. Of course, it will work best if you have a certain degree of authority over your victim. This encompasses all the methods discussed earlier, and it's about using every argument and situation available at your hands to control and manipulate others. Pros, as long as you have strategic mind and wits, it will work on almost anyone. Always reframe the argument to suit your needs and desires. Cons, this method takes practice and careful and thorough understanding of your circumstances. Also, it won't work on those that understand the game just as much as you do. Unless you can trap your victim into your frame, they also will always reframe the frame to suit their own needs. So, beware and practice on your frame game to gain as much control as possible. Yep, that's it, guys. 10 comprehensive methods to manipulate others effectively. I should write a book about this. Thanks, like and subscribe. See you in my next video.